Hey, well, what's up, guys? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here, and the bat signal is shining in the sky, and Batman is driving his new souped-up Batmobile right back into theaters for the latest entry in the Batman franchise, The Batman. So let's talk about it. So I'm a simple man. I see a new Batman movie, I get excited. There's just something cool about that character that is always going to interest me. Always want to see what the new kind of take on him is. But this one actually kind of came with some questions. We've had a lot of different takes on Batman over the years, from Ben Affleck to Lego Batman. It just seems like we've had a lot of Batmans, and just kind of curious whether this movie could actually bring something fresh to the table, be a unique spin, or just sort of another entry, because we got to have Batman movies and they make money. And then also, can the shiny vampire from Twilight, Robert Pattinson, can he actually be a convincing Batman? Can he kind of own the role like some of the other Batmans have in the past? So I was curious. I wasn't super hyped up necessarily, but I was excited to see what they had to offer. And I'm excited to say that the answer to almost all those questions is an emphatic yes. This is a great movie. This is, I would say, this is one of the best comic book movies that I can remember in quite some time. I've never been a super big proponent of like the comparison game of, is it as good as this, or it's better than this but not as good as this. I like to kind of appreciate movies just for what they are. But I will say that, in comparison to something like the Dark Knight trilogy, which is most people kind of hold as like the gold standard of the Batman movies, I don't think it has the same kind of crowd-pleasing, big spectacle rewatchability that those films do. But I definitely think it's on that level of sort of this a well-made, super engaging, this enjoyable Batman film. And I think one of the things that stands out with this movie the most is that this movie has a very clear sense of like what it is. It has a very kind of unique kind of identity to it, and it embraces that hard. It is full on kind of knowing. It's not wish-washy with what it wants to be. It knows what it wants to be, and it executes that. And what that identity is a very grim, dark, kind of unrelentingly grim movie that really, there's not a whole lot of humor or light stuff that goes on in this movie. I will say Colin Farrell, his kind of unrecognizable turn as the Penguin is awesome, and he is good for some great laughs. There's something about that character. People in the theater were laughing at that. But other than that, this is a very dark film. It squeezes all it can, every drop out of its PG-13 rating. It gets about as close as it can to kind of a hard R, or maybe not a hard R, but an R rating as it can. So it is dark, and I think here at The Collision we kind of approach these movies kind of from a Christian perspective, and I do think that the tone and the identity will be maybe a deciding factor. Whether Christians are okay with sort of this dark and violent and really showcasing the cesspool of Gotham. It's not going to be for everyone, but kind of in the same way, I think that not every song needs to be a catchy sing-along. I think there's a place for these sort of darker takes on movies, and I think whether or not the dark kind of tone is for you or not is a different question. But I don't think there's any question that in what it wants to be, it definitely succeeds in kind of capturing that essence. Which is not to suggest that this film doesn't also have exciting action. There's a lot of gripping, kind of thrilling moments in this movie. The car chase with the Batmobile, is sort of edgier seat thrilling. Just like the sound design of it, like the rumble. I saw this in like a Dolby theater. Like the rumble of the seats as the Batmobile is going down, sort of in the rain and in the dark, is one of the most like visceral kind of car chase scenes that I can remember seeing. Like you feel it almost as much as you see it, and there's action. It is a Batman movie. He punches, he kicks, he does all the things that you kind of expect for Batman. But I do think it's kind of a testament, compliment to the script writing, to the pacing of this film. Even though it's a long movie, this is a nearly 3-hour movie, that it somehow manages to kind of maintain a sort of this a feeling of tension almost all throughout it. You do feel the length by the end, but even when it's not like the action and the fighting and stuff, you still kind of feel the foreboding or the tension and of the villain. He's out there, and the pressure that even though if it is sort of a darker kind of more moody thing, it still is very much like a blockbuster, entertaining, captivating film. I think for most people, myself included, kind of wondering, Robert Pattinson, most people, I know he's been in a bunch of other stuff. He's a great actor, but for some of us, he still hasn't, got away from the stigma of the fact that he was Edward Cullen in the Twilight films. But he does a good job. He is well suited for kind of this mopey, younger, kind of angsty Batman. And I would say he is almost exclusively Batman. There's very little Bruce Wayne in this film. I think I didn't crunch the numbers, but I would guess that he spends more time like in the bat suit in this one film than Christopher Bale did in the entire Dark Knight trilogy put together. This is very much like a Batman film, which makes sense with a film called The Batman. But he does well. He does definitely kind of hold his own in that role. The other actors do well too. Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman, she's fine. She does well in as the role that she's given. I do think her character is sort of shortchanged a bit by the script. She shows up in places and she's kind of involved in the action in a way that just feels convenient because the plot needs to have Catwoman in it, and even some like the romantic tension and some of that stuff. At least to me, just felt abrupt because they needed to put it in there. But one of the few kind of areas in the film that just didn't feel earned and felt very much like, it was forced in because that's what the script needed to have. But all the actors, herself included, as far as what they're given, all do a good job. I would also say this is probably the most like socially conscious Batman film or maybe comic book film in many years. Maybe kind of resembling maybe like the Joker from 2019. And I think maybe, the mileage, kind of what mileage you get out of that, whether that's a big issue or not, will just depend on sort of your own sensibilities. But it's not hard. You don't have to look very hard or very long to kind of trace connections between, the movie and stuff that's going on in our, in present day culture. It touches on kind of different conversations, like youth violence and white supremacy and cops and, all that kind of racial divisions and tensions and all that stuff is in there. At least to me, I noticed it, but it wasn't like a distraction. I never felt like it was preaching something or that it was just kind of trying to provide all this like very forced cultural commentary. For me, it just sort of grounded the film a bit. And hey, these are conversations. We're not necessarily giving answers or, giving very simplistic answers, at least, to what's going on. It's just, it's dealing with some of that same stuff. And at least to me, I think that actually helps the film, even though I'm very kind of opposed to this forcing in, I don't want to deal with like American politics in my Batman superhero films. But again, that is something to know going in, that if that is something that's going to drive you crazy, then there's definitely some fodder for that in this film. As far as this content on the surface, this film has quite a bit of profanity. There is a very upfront, out there F-bomb that's used near the beginning of the film, and just kind of all throughout. This isn't like it's not every second word they're dropping some swear word or something, but there is quite a bit of different kind of minor profanities, and it also kind of uses the Lord's name in vain frequently all throughout the film, more than a lot of films that I can remember. So there's definitely profanity, violence. This is a violent movie. It's not necessarily like a super gory or bloody movie. It's still a PG-13 movie, so a lot of the violence is more implied rather than shown. A female character is strangled to death, but you don't actually see that happen. You just sort of hear it, over the audio of that experience. And so things like that, there is some maybe kind of disturbing violence. It is a very violent movie, but it's not necessarily like always a visually violent movie. And sexuality, several things. There is one of the characters, the female characters, is shown kind of briefly in her underwear. It's implied that character is in like a same-sex relationship and that she herself is sort of like a bisexual character. None of those things are ever kind of stated in the film. It's clearly implied through the language. So there's that. There is in a club scene, it's implied that there's a stripper kind of working on a pole. It's blurry in the background, so you can't actually see anything. Again, a lot of the stuff, kind of content, is more implied rather than shown. Kind of their way, I guess, to get away with a PG-13 rating without actually, removing some of the more kind of that sort of content. So as far as like content, there is quite a bit, but I don't think over the top or overly gratuitous in that way. As far as themes, kind of beneath the surface in this film, a couple of things that stood out to me. I think the first one is just sort of the idea of vengeance and kind of in relation to justice. As if you've seen the trailers, like when one of these city thugs asks Batman, who are you? He kind of growls, "I'm vengeance," and then he proceeds to demonstrate it by beating the living snot out of this guy. But it very much is sort of a film that explores vengeance. It's, again, another thing that wasn't stated in the film, but that I kind of took away from it is that kind of his character's name is The Vengeance. That's sort of the name that he adopted for himself. And sort of the Batman is just what people started calling him because he's dressed like a bat. But that, his character is very much kind of this embodiment of vengeance and this anger. And when the movie begins, this isn't an origin story. He's like 2 years into his Batman gig. So he's been doing it for a while to be established, but he's still pretty new at this thing. And you kind of see a Batman that is in his early days, that he's not driven necessarily by like a real high, noble standard of justice. And even if he does have some like moral codes, if he doesn't kill and, some of those things, but he's definitely an angry, driven by kind of an anger and a rage against the city. And one of the most visceral scenes in the movie is this, he takes out a goon, he knocks him out, clearly not a threat anymore, but then proceeds to kind of jump on top of him and just continue to pound him into a bloody pulp. And it just sort of, it hits home the fact that this is not just about kind of cleaning up the city. It's also about like punishing the city. It's not, even if the bad guy's already caught, like he also wants them to suffer. And I think it's interesting. It probes questions as far as like, where is the line? What is the kind of the balance between like vengeance and justice? And is sort of anger and rage really the answer for what he needs to do, or does he need to aspire kind of beyond that? And that's sort of his character arc, I guess, throughout the journey. And maybe the second kind of theme that stood out to me is just sort of the idea of like masks and self-reflection. I think one of the criticisms that I'm sure will be kind of put towards this film is there really isn't a whole lot of character development of any of the characters, especially Bruce Wayne or the Batman. He's really more of like a symbol than he is a person. You don't really learn much about Batman in this movie, but I think whether that works on a story level is a different question. But in like a thematic level, I think it actually is an effective way to kind of explore this theme of like who is he, who is his identity. I don't know if there's ever been a Batman film that like really kind of more honestly shows like the toll that it's been put on Bruce Wayne to become the Batman. Like, there really isn't a Bruce Wayne anymore. It's entirely Batman. He's been consumed by this persona. He's become the masked character. And then you contrast that with the Riddler character, who's also a masked character. And kind of what the way the film explores, especially near the end of this film, is sort of this kind of interesting switch on the superhero genre, where it's the masks aren't there to conceal the true them, to hide their real personality, but that the masks kind of bring out the real them. That by wearing the Batman mask, Bruce Wayne can kind of give in and indulge in all of his anger and his rage, and the Riddler can kind of do the same thing. And this sort of the fact that Batman needs to kind of reflect, who am I? Am I part of the problem? Another quote from the trailer where the Riddler kind of says, "Hey, no, this is a bad city, and like you're a part of this too, Batman. Like you're part of the problem." And I don't want to spoil kind of the end of how they resolve that, but I do think that theme is dealt with in kind of a nuanced and in an interesting way, as far as, do I need to aspire beyond that, or am I just the Batman character? What all does that mean? So I think as a Christian, there's definitely stuff to wrestle with, even if it's not simplistic in the way that it deals with it. There's definitely some interesting material that I found kind of to work through. So in the end, I wasn't super hyped for this. I'm not, a huge comic book movie in general, but I thought this was a great movie. This is probably one of the best movies, or at least one of the movies that I've enjoyed the most seeing in theaters in maybe the last year and a half. I definitely recommend it. With the caveat that it is a dark movie, it does have some maybe kind of more disturbing content, probably not for younger viewers. And I think that there will be some Christian viewers that struggle maybe a bit more with the world's dark enough already. We don't need more darkness. We don't need all the profanity or the violence. And I totally understand that. But I do think that just as a film, this is a well-made film. It's an enjoyable film. And it does have enough kind of interesting philosophical themes and stuff to make it kind of work beyond just the level of mere kind of just diverting entertainment. But let me know what you guys think. Did you guys enjoy this film? Was it too long? Did you buy Robert Pattinson as the Batman? Did you wish there was more character development? I'd love to talk about this film. I think there's a lot to this to talk about. So please let me know in the comment section whether you kind of agree with my take, if you have a different perspective, and we can talk about that. I encourage you, if you guys haven't done so, subscribe to our channel, like the video, just join with what we're doing here at The Collision. We've got live streams, we've got other movie reviews, we've got a lot of stuff we're doing here. I'd love to have you join us with that. But most of all, guys, thanks for watching. Stay safe and continue to collide through World for Christ.